My name is Ingrid. It's been a year since I got married to my husband, Alex. Although we don't work at the same company, we met through work. We both have decent salaries, and since our married life had settled down, we've been thinking about buying a house. We've been living in a rented apartment until now.
Maybe it's time to buy a house.
Our parents' homes are not far from where we currently live, both about a 30-minute drive away. Neither set of parents was the type of interfere too much, so we were able to enjoy our time together without worrying about in-laws. As we started seriously considering getting our own home, I casually mentioned it to my parents. They offered to let us use the land they owned. While my parents weren't rich, both my father and mother grew up in relatively well-off families. They both lived comfortably as only children and received a lot of land from Alex's parents and a substantial inheritance from my mother's parents. My parents raised me without any hardships and yet instilled a sense of discipline in me. Now that I'm married and living away from them, they want to support us in any way they can. That's why they brought up the land offer. I immediately told my husband about it, and building a house on my parents' land became one of our options. From that point on, we started seriously considering our future home. Whenever our schedules aligned, we visited show homes or toured new apartments. We had many opportunities to discuss what kind of house we wanted to live in. What kind of living room would it be nice? How many children did we envision having, and how many rooms should we plan for? Did we need separate workplaces for ourselves? Although we had some conflicting opinions due to our individual preferences, I really enjoyed being able to have these discussions with my husband about our future. One day, while we were visiting a show home, my husband's phone rang. It was a call from my mother-in-law.
"Where are you right now?"
My husband informed her that we were at a show home. A few days later, my mother-in-law called him again after finding out about our plans to build a new house.
"Hey, since you're planning to build a new house, why don't you make it a two-family home? I think it would be great if you lived next to each other."
She suddenly brought up such a suggestion. My husband seemed confused by her sudden request and responded,
"It's difficult when you bring it up out of the blue."
However, my mother-in-law persisted, saying,
"You know, it's convenient to have parents nearby, especially as we are getting older. It's reassuring for us to be close to younger people in case something happens."
She seemed troubled as she pushed the idea. In the end, my husband lightly evaded the situation and said,
"Well, that may be true. We'll think about it."
He then quickly ended the call. To be honest, the option of having a two-family home hadn't even crossed our minds. We were taken aback by my mother-in-law suddenly suggesting such a thing, and it left us feeling perplexed. And then, the following weekend, we were invited by my mother-in-law to have dinner together at their house. We had received such invitations once every few months, so we headed to my in-laws' house as usual. Upon arrival, my mother-in-law right then and there brought up the topic again.
"Hey, about the previous discussion, have you given it any thought? Building a two-family home."
My husband looked awkward and tried to divert the conversation.
"Oh, well."
But my mother-in-law had no intention of giving up. She continued persistently.
"I talked to your father about it as well.
If you decide to build a two-family home, we'll contribute financially. It will be reassuring for everyone to live together,
right, Ingrid?
This time, she smiled at me and looked my way. Caught off guard, I blurted out an answer without thinking. Oh, yes, I suppose so. My mother-in-law then turned to my husband and said,
See? Ingrid agrees too.
She started pressuring him intensely. I deeply regretted my impromptu response as I never expected her to bring me into the conversation. Personally, I didn't feel the need to live in any closer to either set of parents, considering they are already not too far away. However, my in-laws seemed very excited about the idea.
When are you planning to build? Make sure to have spacious rooms, okay?
They started adding more and more requests to the discussion. After returning home, I asked my husband, Hey, things seem to be progressing on their own. What should we do? He gave a troubled response.
It's a dilemma.
What about you, Ingrid? If we do decide to build, we'll have to borrow your parents' land. He brought up a valid point. I didn't dislike my in-laws, so as long as it wasn't a complete cohabitation, it might be fine, I thought casually. Considering that my in-laws were getting older, it was undeniable that having them nearby would bring a sense of security in case anything happened. Moreover, if we were to have children in the future, having grandparents nearby could be a favorable environment. My husband and I had a serious discussion about these aspects. Additionally, my mother-in-law frequently contacted us to passionately express how much they wanted to live together with us. Unable to resist my mother-in-law's persistence, my husband and I decided to build a two-family home borrowing my parents' land. When we conveyed this decision to my in-laws, they were overjoyed, as expected.
Now we can feel at ease no matter what happens,
she said with a smile. Overwhelmed by their happiness, both my husband and I said it was a good decision to go for a two-family home. Soon after, preparations began immediately, and the architectural plans gradually took shape. The interior style, room layout, and size were being determined one after another, and I couldn't help but feel excited. In the end, it was decided that we would contribute half of the funds, while the other half would come from my in-laws. My husband and I used our savings for the down payment and took out a loan from the bank for the rest. And so, the construction of our long-awaited dream home began. Ideally, at this stage, we should have taken care of the financial matters thoroughly. However, none of the money that my in-laws had promised to pay was being transferred. Being the first to notice, I informed my husband, Hey, it seems like the money from your parents hasn't been transferred yet.
Huh? Seriously?
My husband also seemed caught off guard, and he quickly called his parents, urging them to transfer the money as soon as possible. However, my mother-in-law responded,
We've already made various preparations on our end. Could you please cover it for now? Pretty please. We'll pay it back in full later.
With that, she hung up the phone. However, since my in-laws had said they could pay their share in one go, we had already taken out a loan from the bank, subtracting their portion. That's why it would be a problem if they didn't follow through with the transfer. My husband became frustrated with his parents' attitude and made several more attempts to contact them. But my mother-in-law insisted,
It's not possible right now. Please cover it for the time being.
And the conversation went nowhere. Helplessly, I visited my parents' home and explained the situation in detail. Maybe we can put it on hold and consult with the construction company. To that, my parents replied, We'll cover your parents' share. There is no way Ingrid and her husband should give up on their long-awaited dream home. Saying that, they paid the money that was supposed to come from my in-laws in one lump sum. Thanks to my parents, the construction progressed as planned, and a few months later, our long-awaited dream home was successfully completed. Upon learning about it, my in-laws moved in before us and started inviting acquaintances over almost every day. Since it was a two-family house, it didn't affect us much, but from the snippets of conversation we overheard, it seemed like they were boasting as if they had built the house themselves, continuously seeking validation from others. Both my husband and I were disgusted by their attitude, but we also felt responsible for agreeing to build a two-family house in the first place, so we silently endured it. However, even after a month had passed since the move, my in-laws had not paid us for the house. My husband, unable to bear it any longer, expressed his frustration. Mom, Dad, enough is enough. When are you going to pay? But my mother-in-law evaded the question as always. We'll pay. Don't worry, just a little longer. Despite 2 or 3 months passing by, there was no sign that my in-laws intended to pay us. I had relied on my parents' support to cover the cost, so I turned to my husband and pleaded, Do you think your parents might consider paying us soon? I've been asking them every day too. He looked troubled and apologetic as he spoke. Realizing that this situation was unfair to our parents as well, I decided to speak directly to my in-laws. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry to bring this up, but my parents have been covering the amount you were supposed to pay. It's been over 3 months since we moved in, so could you please settle the payment? Upon hearing this, my in-laws sighed and responded, If you keep nagging like this, it makes me not want to pay at all, you know. They said something incomprehensible, leaving us bewildered. Furthermore, we also have something to discuss. She brought up the topic, ignoring my husband's plea not to divert the conversation. Don't change the subject. But she completely disregarded his words. In fact, my mother-in-law said something outrageous. Since Ines and her family will be living here together with us starting from tomorrow, I want you two to move out. Huh? Both my husband and I couldn't help but let out a dumbfounded response to my mother-in-law's unexpected statement. Ines is my husband's older sister and would be considered my sister-in-law. She's married and has 2 children. I was speechless and perplexed. My husband regained his composure and confronted his mother. Why would Ines suddenly move in? It has nothing to do with the current situation, right? Then my mother-in-law let out a deep sigh and explained. Ines' husband lost his job and they were kicked out of their apartment. They have nowhere else to go. So I invited them to stay here. Both my husband and I were stunned. Why did she decide something like this without consulting us? It was utterly unreasonable and unacceptable. To make matters worse, she added, But you know, Ines' family has children too. It would be difficult for us to accommodate 4 more people. So I thought it would be best if you 2 moved out. She said such a thing, asking us to leave the house we built. What is she thinking? Stunned by the absurdity of the situation, I sat there in disbelief as my husband stood up.
Enough is enough. Why do we have to leave our own home? And to top it off, you're letting your sisters move in without even consulting us. It's just not right. Seeing my usually mild-mannered husband this angry was the first for me. However, my in-laws responded with an exasperated expression as if saying, "Oh well, you too will be fine, won't you? If anything happens, Ingrid's parents will help you out." She said that with a smirk on her face. The next day, my sister-in-law's family moved in with a lot of baggage. There wasn't a single word of apology or gratitude from them. "Oh, aren't you two leaving?"
With that remark, she started at us with annoyance. Why did we have to go through all this? Unable to bear it any longer, I finally reached my breaking point and discussed it with my husband. We packed up the bare essentials and left the house. Enough was enough. We returned to my parents' house and explained the situation, apologizing for the inconvenience caused by the delayed payment. Our own house was no longer habitable and we didn't know what to do. As I cried and sought advice, my parents smiled and reassured us.
"Don't worry, everything will be fine."
I thought it was just a comforting statement to ease our worries at the time, but my parents immediately began discussing something and made phone calls. And a few days later, my mother said, "I'm ready, let's go together." Saying that, she took my husband and me to our house. When she rang the intercom, my mother-in-law came out, and as soon as she saw my husband and me, she said, "Just in time, your stuff was in the way." However, when she noticed my parents behind us, "Oh, hello," she greeted us awkwardly. My father then spoke to her.
"We have something to discuss. May we intrude for a moment?" he said with a smile.
My mother-in-law forced a smile and said, Sure." Reluctantly, she led us into the house. My husband and my parents and I sat across from my in-laws and sister-in-law.
"What is this about?"
my sister-in-law asked my parents with an annoyed expression. Then my father spoke firmly.
"We would like you to leave this house," he said it decisively. "You do know that the land on which this house stands is under my name, don't you?"
"I know, but what's the point?" my mother-in-law replied. At that moment, my mother interjected. "Did you also know that the title of this house is in my name?" she said. Upon hearing that statement, my in-laws widened their eyes. "Huh? Isn't the house under our son's name?" They were flustered. So, this house was built under my mother's name. My parents built it in their name for the sake of any future event, saying, "You only need to pay the loan." Initially, my mother had plenty of inheritance from my parents, and she even said she would use that money to build our house. However, after discussing it with my husband, we felt it would be unfair, so we asked for the title to be in their name only. Of course, we hadn't told my in-laws about this, so they seemed very surprised.
"In other words, this house is mine, and the land belongs to my husband. You have no right to live here without our permission. Do you understand?"
My mother said it with a smile and gently, but I don't think there was any laughter in her eyes. My usually kind parents seemed to exude a formidable determination at this moment. Then, my sister-in-law said.
Hey, what are we going to do? It'll be a problem if we can't live here.
She confronted my in-laws, and my in-laws were at a loss for what to do. Finally, my father said, "If you insist on staying even in this situation, I will report it to the police." He said that.
The police? Please don't do that.
My in-laws desperately pleaded. You should say something too. My sister-in-law started to get angry at my husband, so I also told her clearly, "Please leave." I said it firmly to my sister-in-law. In the end, my father presented them with the ultimatum. "If you don't leave within 2 days, I will contact the police." Upon hearing that, my in-laws and my sister-in-law grumbled but left within the specified 2 days. My sister-in-law's husband said to us, "We have children here too, you heartless people." But that's none of our concern. In the end, the 2-family house we built became the home for our family, my husband and me, and my parents. My parents chose to sell the house they originally lived in and live with us. Since then, my husband has completely cut off ties with my in-laws and sister-in-law. It seems he even deleted all their contact information. I received a few messages from them afterward, but with my husband's advice, I also blocked their calls. Since then, we have been leading peaceful days together with my parents. A year later, we were blessed with a child, and having my parents around has been a great support since the day they were born. My parents have helped us in every way possible, and I'm truly grateful. From now on, I want to cherish my parents and repay their kindness in any way I can.